Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Griggs, and it's my pleasure to host today's extra online event in NALC's Rebuilding Community Series, Planning for the Future. Before we get started, firstly, a few housekeeping announcements. I'll assume that you know the location of your own fire exits and restrooms and coffee and tea making facilities. Could I ask if you please change your Zoom name to include your council or the organisation that you represent, if you haven't already done so. This event is being recorded, so if you don't wish to be in the recording, then do switch off your video. We'll be using the chat function throughout to enable you to interact with each other, to share ideas and experiences, to pose questions to our panel and provide feedback on any questions posed by them at the end of their presentation. As you'll have found out, you'll be muted throughout to help reduce background noise. And when we move to the discussion section after our speakers, I'll try and call on as many people as possible today, and we will then unmute you. Please bear with us during that process. Now, our Rebuilding Communities online event series take two forms. Our in-conversation sessions are where we bring smaller groups of local leaders to come together to discuss key challenges facing the sector and share good practice. And our leaders talk sessions, such as today, are when we hear from national organisations, key thinkers, policymakers and leaders to give you as local leaders the opportunity to hear direct about key issues and topics of the day, and to put questions and share thinking with colleagues across the country. Today's event is on the government's Planning for the Future white paper, which is currently out for consultation, and with a particular focus today on the implications for neighbourhood planning. I think this is a timely and unique opportunity for our event to help colleagues understand and discuss the proposed changes and reforms to the planning system. These include streamlining the planning process, digitizing the planning system for plan making and decision taking, a focus on design and sustainability, reform to developer contributions and infrastructure delivery, making more land available for housing delivery, and importantly, what next for neighbourhood planning. Our speakers will tell us more about this today, and I'm particularly grateful that our colleagues from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government are joining us today and providing this timely and important briefing. As I'm sure I know you will do, please show to them the usual courtesy for when we have colleagues join our events, and in putting your comments to them. Please remember they are officials and not their ministers. Before I hand over to our speakers, it's my pleasure to ask the chairman of NALC, Councillor Sue Baxter, just to say a few brief words.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Justin, and good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to briefly echo Justin's warm welcome and say it's great to see so many councils joining our events programme, which has proved really popular. The subject of planning is always a hot topic, and none more so than now. And I'm really grateful to our MHCLG colleagues for joining us to help explain the proposals and to hear your views. But as Justin says, and I'm sure you will anyway, please do share your views and comments today in a civil and respectful way. Thanks so much, enjoy the event, and back to Justin.
Thanks for that, Sue. And now it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome Jen Beresford and Rob Griffith from MHCLG. Over to you guys.
Hi, sorry, just working this out. So my name's Jen Beresford, and I'm part of the neighbourhood plans team at MHCLG. I've got a few colleagues with me today, so I have Rob Griffith, who's going to take us through some of the discussion later on, Chris Mountain and Andrew Short, who are going to help with some questions as well. And sort of just to start off, it was just to say that, this is one of various engagement sessions that we're having with the sector, with various stakeholders. And we want these sessions to provide an overview of our proposals, but also to get some feedback and to answer your questions. As mentioned, myself and Rob Griffith will be leading on this. And this is a bit of an agenda for what we're hoping to go through today. So first of all, we have, why does the government want to reform the planning system? And then we're going to take you through some of the more high-level proposals in the white paper before we kind of zoom in on neighbourhood planning and get some feedback from yourselves.
Okay, so I think Jen is having a slight technical hitch. So I'm going to ask Rob, are you able to just stand in while Jen just sorts that out, and hopefully she'll be back with us to take back over her talk and her slides. So Rob, you need to unmute. Thanks, Rob. Great.
Sorry, the host wasn't letting me unmute myself. So, okay, yes. So while Jen gets back online, then I will make a bit of an attempt to kind of take you through some of the early slides. If someone wouldn't mind pulling up the slides for me, that would be very helpful. Oh, I've just seen that Jen's back in, so I'll let Jen take over. And she's asking to be unmuted.
Hi guys, sorry about that. Hopefully you can hear me again. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Technical glitch. Share screen. Okay, sorry. So back onto the agenda. Yeah, and then finally at the end we'll just give you a brief sort of discussion on like next steps. So first of all, we wanted to talk about why the government wants to reform the planning system. So, as you'll know, the planning system in England is, it's about 7 decades old, and we're kind of looking for a new, more efficient approach that would fit a modern society and a modern economy. We know there have been quite a few issues that have been highlighted, and this includes things like affordability and supply, but also a lot of issues surrounding the complexity of the planning system. And these reforms are really a chance for us to try and secure better outcomes in terms of land for housing, beauty and environmental quality, as well as making things simpler for all stakeholders, including community groups, and to give everyone greater certainty. So on my screen now, I have some just like an outline of the key proposals on areas that I think are quite relevant to neighbourhood planning. And first of all, I'll start off talking about obviously local plans. So the proposals that we have for, in the white paper focus on an area-based approach where all land will be allocated either to a growth, renewal or protection category. And there's also the proposal for a binding housing requirement figure, but this is proposed to take into account constraints, so things like green belt. And then there's also the 30-month statutory timescale for producing a plan. When considering community engagement, the proposals discuss the strategic use of land to be considered by communities at the local plan stage, with the idea of this giving greater certainty to communities and developers. There's also, one of our key proposals is like maintaining the role of neighbourhood planning as an important aspect of the planning system under the reforms. And Rob will talk to you a little bit about that later on and open up some discussion about how we can do that. And then there's also communities part of the place shaping through engagement on local design codes. Alongside that, we have some more systemic changes. So you'll probably have noticed that there is a big focus on a digital transformation to bring things more in line with modern society and to make things easier to sort of access and more efficient. And then there's also a big focus on engagement and how we can increase and how we can make engagement better. So there can be a lot of inconsistency around that and how we can improve that and make communities feel even more involved. And then also acknowledging that resource and skill will be needed to support this. Then we've also got a focus on design and beauty. So for example, the proposal for a fast track for beauty with automatic permission for certain developments that fit in with design codes and standards. And also the idea for design codes to be set locally to guide development to shape communities. And then the kind of last sort of high level one that I'm going to talk you through is the infrastructure levy, where one of the proposals is a replacement of section 106, which will, with the idea behind that to provide greater clarity and certainty and to remove a negotiation. And also the aim is to collect more than the current system and deliver at least as much affordable housing on site. And then next we would go through the neighbourhood planning proposals, which I would like to hand over to my colleague Rob to take us through.
Thanks, Jen. So I want to spend a bit of time talking in particular about neighbourhood planning and neighbourhood plans, and in particular the role that it could play in the reformed planning system as set out in the white paper, which Jen has nicely summarised. Now, just to begin with, there is a recognition from the government that neighbourhood planning is an important part of the current system and continues to have real value. It's had a key role, in particular, in strengthening community engagement in the planning system. And as a lot of you will be familiar with, there's lots of good practice around community engagement that we can draw on when we're thinking about how we can engage in this new system that's set out in the white paper. Particularly recently, neighbourhood plans have also been taking a lead in identifying locally accepted sites for new housing, and also focusing on how design quality can be improved in local areas. So these are really important contributions that it's made. And we've seen lots of excellent progress as well with take-up. So we've now got over 1,000 plans in place and over 2,600 groups who've actually started the process. This is really, really encouraging stuff. So the white paper itself is very clear about that the government wants to see neighbourhood planning retained and in fact actually encouraged. There are plenty of areas around the country where there isn't much activity going on, in particular in the north of England, and also in many sort of more deprived parts of the country, there isn't really much neighbourhood planning going on. So there's lots of opportunity out there. The white paper also goes on to say that the government wants to explore how neighbourhood planning could be more focused to reflect some of these wider proposals that Jen has set out, including around this new approach to local plan making. So, for example, as Jen mentioned, digital transformation is one of the key changes proposed for the wider planning system. We want to consider how neighbourhood groups as they prepare their neighbourhood plans, could actually exploit more of these digital technologies, whether it's digital data sets or different engagement techniques, for example, 3D visualization, how they can actually use some of these tools which are available at the moment to a higher degree and take advantage of them. So that's something that we're really keen to explore. And then one of the key elements of the proposals around how the new development plan will be, what it will look like essentially. So the proposal is that it would be a more of a map-based system, a digital map-based system that's more easy to access and engage with for communities. And this is something we want to think about in terms of neighbourhood planning as well. So at the moment, a neighbourhood plan is a PDF document on a website. Is there a way of actually producing a neighbourhood plan that could be a little bit more engaging for communities? So that's something that we're thinking about too. We also want to consider whether there are improvements that we could make to the neighbourhood planning process, taking into account some of the proposals around local plans. So for example, are there ways in which we could streamline the process for environmental assessment? Is there a way that we can make evidence requirements more proportionate as well, so that we can actually make the neighbourhood planning process a little bit easier for groups, because we know that some groups find that there are challenges in going through the process. And we also want to consider how the neighbourhood plan would actually fit into the wider system. So as Jen says, the proposal is that the local plan would categorise land into 3 categories: the growth areas, the renewal areas, and the protected areas. We want to think about how the neighbourhood plan would fit into that process. So would for example, a neighbourhood plan be able to identify additional smaller scale growth sites? And what role would they or could they have in setting some of the development parameters, which would be a feature of these growth sites? So again, something to consider there. And then a sort of overarching question, really. A lot of this kind of new way of doing things in terms of digital, what kind of support do we as the government need to provide neighbourhood groups so they can actually engage with this new process? So I think those are sort of some of the key kind of areas that we're thinking about. And if Jen doesn't mind moving on to the next slide, I've sort of summarised some of these key questions, which I hope will help stimulate discussion. I mean, what we're keen to hear about is your views, really. Do you have a view about what you think neighbourhood plans should be doing in future under a system like this? Do you, for example, think there is particular support that parish councils and other neighbourhood groups would need to actually work in this new system? So really, really grateful to get any views that you have.